next speaker that we're going to be speaking to us today is a brother who is a common teacher in this congregation, and he spoke this morning during class talking about how our purpose is to glorify God. How our worship is about God. It's not the attitude of what's in it for me, but it's what is in it for Him. Realizing that He is the God of the universe. The one who sent His Son, the one who saves men from their sins. And He's one who is passionate about that, and He knows about God's love. He knows about God's grace, and He knows about God's forgiveness. So I'm going to ask Steve, will you come up here and tell us how you came to Christ and tell us what Christ did for you?
This morning I want to talk to you a little bit about the grace of God and His forgiveness. And the reason why I want to talk to you about it is because by telling you my story, maybe you won't have to go through what I had to go through to find it. I was baptized in the church when I was 17 years old. And like a lot of my friends, I did what they did and I acted like they did. And yet when I became baptized, I tried to act different. I tried to act like God wanted me to act. And I started to pull away from them. I didn't just come out and say, you know, I'm a Christian now, I'm not going to do that anymore, or anything like that. But I tried to pull away and try to act more like God wanted me to act. And I didn't hang around them as much as I did before. But it was difficult. It was really difficult because of the peer pressure and the pressure to act a certain way, my old way. It was hard for me. But as I grew grew into adulthood, Christianity became more and more a part of my life. In fact, a lot of my family members came to Christ. And so that pressure to act one way became a pressure to act the other way. It was like I wanted to make sure that I spoke and I acted. And I attended as many classes as possible, and I didn't miss anything. And I did everything right, and I didn't want to do or say anything that was not befitting to being a Christian. In fact, really what I was trying to do was I was trying to just be perfect. You know, if I could get to that point, then I would be okay. You know? And really, I had that feeling that I just wanted to be perfect. And the reason why, and I expected, and I really believe this, I thought God expected me to be perfect. Because that was the way, you know, I was surrounded by that, and I just wanted to do everything. Well, the problem was I wasn't perfect. And when I would sin or do something contrary to what I thought God wanted me to do, it would really, really affect me deeply. It would send me into depression. And I would be sorrowful for it. And I'm not, you know, I remember and week to week I'd come here and I'd partake of the Lord's Supper and I'd think, God, this is a new beginning, help me through this week. And some weeks I'd have good weeks and some days I'd have bad weeks. And I remember one time I was having a good week and I was driving on the freeway and I looked down and I was going over the speed limit and I'm not obeying the laws of the land, I'm sinning. And believe it or not, it was that sent me into depression. How in the world can I be pleasing to God when every time I come to Him, I have to come in shame and guilt and ask for forgiveness? And so it became hard for me to pray to God. Or I'd think have a good week and all of a sudden I remember some joke I laughed at that I shouldn't have laughed at, and it would just, you know, I continually was messing up. And I was thinking, how could God forgive me? And over the years, it continued. And it got worse. And it got to a point where on a weekly basis, let alone a daily basis, I didn't know whether I was saved or not. I thought I was saved one minute and not saved the next minute. And that pressure was just overwhelming because I felt like, God, how could God forgive me? How could he forgive the things that I do when I keep on having to come to him and say, God, please forgive me? And it drove me nuts. And I'd feel that shame and that guilt, and every time I prayed or every time I went to church and saw the perfect people who obviously didn't have sin in their life and didn't have to worry about that. And every time they looked at me, I thought, yep, I know what you're doing. I see right through you. You should be up there, you know? And I really did feel that, and it was hard for me because I didn't find any peace in Christ. And that's what I wanted, peace. I wanted peace one way or the other. And my answer was for me to get that peace, was to stop attending. Stop praying. Not all at once, but slowly I realized I didn't feel as bad when I didn't come to God in prayer. Because every time I came to God in prayer, I was shame. I was thinking, oh, here I go again. Or every time I have to come see the perfect people, then it remind me I'm not living the way that I should live. And it became so overwhelming that I just decided to stop coming because I didn't want to be confronted by my shortcomings. And it wasn't that I stopped believing in God or stopped believing in the truth of the church. It was that I wanted the peace of not having to be perfect. And that peace of not disappointing God all the time. And I thought if I could just push God out of my mind, if I could just push God out of my mind, I might find some peace. Well, it didn't work. And pretty soon I turned to substance abuse. And to mask and to cover up those feelings of inadequacy and those feelings like I was trapped because I couldn't go back to God because I couldn't be perfect and he wouldn't forgive me because he doesn't love me. So I knew the truth, but I couldn't do anything about it and I felt trapped. And so I wanted that peace, so I turned to substance abuse. And oh, it worked for a little bit. You know, it helped some. But whenever I guess you call it sobered up, although alcohol was not my thing, there was God, right? Reminding me, you're doing wrong. You're doing wrong. You're living wrong. And I knew I was living wrong. I knew my destiny, but I couldn't change it. I felt trapped. I felt I couldn't go back to God and he couldn't love me or forgive me, especially now that I had compounded my sins. And I also felt I couldn't get away from him. I couldn't get away from him or out of my mind. So I continued, so I could find some peace. So I continued in this spiral. My lifestyle went down because of this, out of this guilt and out of the shame of thinking I'm lost because I can't be perfect and I can't find forgiveness. And it just became cyclical because I would just go down and down and down where I felt terrible. And at one point in my lifestyle, in my life, I felt helpless. And I felt hopeless. And I felt lost. And I felt trapped. And it was that point that God rescued me. He plucked me out of my lifestyle. That I'd gotten myself into an impossible trap situation, and he plucked me out, and he took me out of there. And I couldn't have done it myself, but he did it for me in Providence. And he gave me time to recover. He gave me time to think.